Colossians chapter 3, verses 5 to 11. Put to death, therefore, what is earthly in you: sexual immorality, impurity, passion, evil desire, and covetousness, which is idolatry. On account of this, the wrath of God is coming. In this you too once walked when you were living in them, but now you must put them all away: anger, wrath, malice, slander, and obscene talk from your mouth. Do not lie to one another, seeing that you have put off the old self with its practices and have put on the new self, which is being renewed in knowledge after the image of its creator. Here there is not Greek and Jew, circumcised and uncircumcised, barbarian, Scythian, slave, free, but Christ is all and in all. This is the word of God.
Tonight is the Super Bowl, and one team is going to win. You cannot have a tie in the Super Bowl. And so certainly part of the preparations for an event like this is to make sure that your defense is strong if you're playing against a very skilled and able team. But the goal is not simply to prevent the other team from scoring. You're not going to win unless you actually score. So defense is important, very important, but the agenda of the team can't be entirely protective. And this winds up true in most other spheres of life. Financially, you want to make money, but you also need to protect your assets. Relationally, you want to deepen and make friendships, but you also have to guard yourself against problematic people or interactions. And so the defensive component is part of existence. When it comes to life, we should be pursuing life in its fullness. And yet the world is complicated. So there's a defensive component where we need to be protective, we need to be addressing problems. And sometimes things get so complicated that all of our time and energy is in protective mode, and we lose sight of what life is really about. Now, one of the reasons that happens is because we never really understood what life was about. We devote ourselves to pursuing things that seem important and meaningful, and when things get stressful, they're not sustaining, and we have nothing substantial to hold on to. So then our attitude goes towards putting out fires, dealing with problems, unable to explain why we're spiraling downward. Sometimes it's because we're overwhelmed, but sometimes it's because we've never really figured out what we should actually prioritize, what we should be pursuing. We're slowly going through the book of Colossians, and the dominant theme of Colossians is giving us a vision of what is good and beautiful and right. It's setting life before us, showing us the greatness of Christ, the goodness of the good news. That's the emphasis. Make sure that you are pursuing that, taking hold of that, so that you grow, you deepen, you mature, you reach the fullness of what's possible in that. But obviously, at some point, there needs to be some addressing the problems, the defensive. And so the passage we're looking at today gives us a window into that. So we need to remember this passage in its context. This passage is talking about what we need to stop doing, what we need to resist. That's actually very important. The Christian life is wonderful, beautiful, but we are complicated, messy. The world is broken. And so you can't simply say, I want a wonderful life and I'm going to pursue joy and happiness and peace, and think that you could ignore the challenges that are within you, the forces that are at work around you. One part of the Christian life is resisting or struggling or what feels like a battle. That's part of the Christian life. The danger is, like with everything else, we could lose sight and think that's the fundamental Christian life. That's the moralistic take, that basically my job is to conquer evil and to resist it. And now we're not living for anything, we're living against things. And we could lose our way. Colossians angers us to make clear, what are we living for? What is the life offered to us that we could take hold of that's meaningful, that if you really deepen in it, you will grow. But along the way, there's resistance. It's within you, it's around you. And so there needs to be some awareness of how to struggle, how to resist. And so that's what's in view this morning. If we want to mature, that's the theme, in the fullness of the life that we're offered in Christ, there's some intentionality to look at the natural ways to us, the former habits, and to say, I need to put them aside in order to really take on what's new. So this morning I want to consider 3 questions. What is the problem that's being raised here? How do you deal with it? And then finally, why is this important? Why is this something that needs to be part of the Christian life? So we're going to begin with what is the problem? So there's a particular way it's being presented here, so this is not a full view of all of the problems in life, but it does give us a paradigm that really causes us to mature. In verse 5, we're told to put to death what is earthly in us. And so the problem is this earthliness, but it's actually a little bit more sophisticated, the worldview that's being presented to us, and we're prone to misunderstand this. And so the Bible presents a broken relationship between God and humanity. We're separated. That's not how it should be. And this broken relationship, there's a breaking of these spheres, where there's the earthly realm where humanity dwells, and there's the heavens where God is. And it's like there's a veil, there's a barrier, like the fog has come down, so we on earth don't know whether or not there is a God, whether or not the heavens are real, the ways of God are mysterious to us. And so we're living without the full information. We're inhabiting life on this earth, but we don't know all that we're supposed to know. So when it speaks of the earthly, the problem is not with the earth. And so a simple way to see this that would be wrong would be to think, okay, the world is concerned about material things like your bodies and food and money, and the church is concerned about spiritual things like God and worship. And so what we're being told, the warning about earthly things is, don't worry about your embodied existence. Put all of that aside and become a religious person. But the reality is the picture we're given is a little bit more like when Christ has come to remove the separating veil between God and humanity. Not only are we restored relationally, but it's like the access to the heavenly realms has been opened up so that we could seek those things. We could set our minds there while we live on this earth. So it's not about material versus spiritual. We are told in the Bible that food is to be received with thanks. So you could take what God has provided for you, not simply because you need the energy for your biological existence, but you could enjoy it because God has made food delicious. So food is material, and racism is an ideology. It's not a thing, although it expresses itself, but it's earthly. Food is of the earth, but it's not problematic. An attitude like racism is not tangible, but it's very of this earth. That's what this is getting at. It's not physical versus non-physical, but it's the nature of is this corrupting, is it problematic, or is it fundamentally good? We're told in verse 5, put to death what's earthly in you, which is not to seek a non-embodied existence, but to make sure that your body is not ruled by your corrupt desires. And so your earthly existence is meant to be lived out of a fuller picture of the reality of having your mind set on this vaster picture of reality than the truncated view that says this earth is all there is, and so run after whatever you can, get the most that you can, because life is short. And that is not the way to live. That would be an earthly way to live. And so there's an aspect in this where it talks about being renewed in our thinking. And it's kind of like with medicine that to get a child to take a pill is not very easy, or to get them to drink something that tastes terrible. And so medicines are often formulated to look like a fruit punch drink, but then you need to put that child-proof cap on it. It's this dance where you want the child to take the medicine when it's needed, but you don't want the child to like it so much that they go and drink 3 bottles of it. And there's something about our earthly existence of not understanding God and his ways that leaves us immature, where we don't relate to the things of the world properly, and sometimes it becomes very problematic. It becomes harmful. We want more of certain things, that are damaging to us. This passage is a reminder that there needs to be a growth, an understanding of what's good and what's not good, and a putting off of what's problematic and a taking on of what's good. As we look at this passage, there are sort of three sections, or here's just a way for simplicity of categorizing things for us this morning. I'm going to begin with verse 5, where it talks about covetousness, which is idolatry. That phrase is, I'm beginning with covetousness because it has that qualifier that's actually kind of profound theologically. There are 10 commandments. The 10th commandment is not to covet. So is there a problem with wanting more in life? No. Is there a problem with seeing things and delighting in them and desiring them? No. But covetousness is that poisonous, corrupting desire that takes the desire for flourishing and for more, and it makes you crave what others have so that you are willing to do what you should not. And so it's interesting with the 10 Commandments, it begins, remember, have no other gods. And then within it, there's the habits of not misusing God's name, or not committing adultery, or not stealing or murdering people. And then it ends with covetousness. But the New Testament perspective in a couple of places will say, but that covetous desire is itself false worship. When you look at the things that somebody has and you're willing to steal them, you're willing to kill them for it, or you're willing to grumble against God that your life is so lacking and unfair because of your covetousness, that you see things and they become so important to you. You're stepping into worship. And that's the Christian picture is human beings by nature are religious. It's not will you be a Christian or join a religion or will you not, but who or what will you devote yourself to? And what we're told is Christ is good. He offers great things. You can trust him. Put your life in him. Follow him in his ways. Let that form your identity and your ethic. But if he's not doing it, what is? Is it success? Is it the model in New York that these achievements are what will be worth sacrificing your time and energy for? Because if I get them, then I will have meaning, then I will have an importance. Is it the possessions? Is it the relationships? What is it? We're given a vision of what's healthy, and we're told that if we're not devoting ourselves to what's good, we're going to devote ourselves to something. And covetousness is within all of us. A healthy person should want more, should have a certain measure of ambition. Sin comes in and corrupts that and says, but I'm not satisfied, I'm not content, I want what they have. Now I'm envious, now I'm resentful, now I'm bitter. And so covetousness becomes idolatry. And so we're told to set our minds on the deeper, more valuable things, and that puts things in their proper perspective, and this is essential. There is an interesting argument that G.K. Chesterton made. G.K. Chesterton was a Christian thinker in the early part of the 20th century when communism was rising up in greater power and taking over different governments. And one of the ideas is that religion, well, one of the phrases coming out of Marxist thinking, religion is an opiate, an opium for the masses. An oppressive government is going to want to keep the people distracted and busy so they can take advantage of them. So religion works very well for an oppressive government. And so people start to think, oh, therefore the problem is religion. And Chesterton responded by saying this. He says, the truth is that irreligion is the opium of the people. Whenever the people do not believe in something beyond the world, they will worship the world. But above all, they will worship the strongest thing in the world. And that's what Colossians is saying. There's something good. Set your sights on it and devote yourself to that, and goodness will flow. The analysis is if you're setting your mind on something in this world, some idea, some possession, some person, some ideology, it's not that you're not religious, but now your main goal is going to be to set your sights on what you perceive to be the most powerful thing. And is that not kind of where a society is going when we're saying, hey, we want this neutral, non-religious sphere, but what are we doing is we're starting to divide up along lines of who's got an argument for getting the power, who resents those who have it, who's willing to fight for it. And there's something dangerous here where the things of the world are becoming ultimate things, that covetousness takes something good in humanity and it corrupts us and it turns against us. So that's an example of something we need to be mindful of. If you're going to grow and mature, you need to be aware of the presence of covetousness because it's idolatry. So don't worship what is false. Don't devote yourself to something that is not worthy. Figure out what you really should devote yourself to. That's what Colossians is encouraging. So that's one thing. Now, the second thing that I want to talk about in the first part of verse 5, the first four, can all sort of be categorized as forms of sexual immorality. Some people even think that covetousness fits that category, although each of these terms are different, and so each has its own accent. It would be worth delving deeper into this at another time. But for the sake of simplicity, if we just assume that this is highlighting that another example of a desire in us, which is a good desire, sexual desire, gets corrupted when human beings go astray. And so if there's one word that's not in these verses, although some translations have the word lust. Lust is a simple, helpful way of understanding where sexual desire goes wrong. So the problem of humanity is we are to see the greatness of God and become like him, to be generous, to be wise, to be kind, to be truthful, to be just. And somehow in not seeing him and devoting ourselves to other things, there's something about our self-serving desire. I have desires for my own satisfaction at other costs. And this happens with theft and possessions, but it happens with our sexuality. When our operating system is, at the end of the day, me and what I want is the most important thing, we get into very dangerous territory when it comes to seeing a person as an item to be consumed. You know, there's a person that I'm drawn to that I could benefit from, and so I want something from that person, which is not a delight, which is not a connection, which is not about giving, which is not about a healthy exchange, but is about a functional, almost like an economic exchange. That's the healthiest we could come to. Can we agree to do this in a way that is least harmful and so that we'll have the least regrets? And we've turned sexuality into something that it's kind of like, Instacart or Grubhub, or I'm hungry and I want to have food. And now we've taken the same apps that are like, you know what, if I just want a sexual interaction, it's not really that different from just wanting, we live in New York where there's a million great restaurants, I want the next great meal. If I could go on this app and find the person for tonight, it's fine. And there's something in that that's corrupt. But what we're dealing with is profound enough that it requires the kind of maturity that we tend not to have. And so, for example, one of the means of the powers of the world that are presented in Colossians as these enslaving, corrupt powers that are at work is to turn us against one another by separating out things into half-truths so that people are each taking a piece of the truth. What I mean by that is our sexual desire is always luring us beyond the bounds of what's healthy in nearly all of us. And so we need some kind of restraint. And so the church, understandably, has said we need to define what sex is for and where the boundaries are. But we wind up talking about sex somewhat clinically, which is, okay, what is the purpose of sex? Well, fundamentally, procreation. There's something wonderful about two beings coming together to do what only God can do, to create life. So the sexual union is life-giving in a remarkable way. So what is sex about? It's about procreation. And then, because the desires are beyond that, we need to create the safe sphere, which is marriage, where then it's lawful. And almost the impression you could sometimes get is, I have these desires, and the main thing is to manage them, because I don't want 25 kids. And so I need to find a relationship that's lawful, where maybe there will be children, but at the end of the day, I need to act on these desires in a way that's lawful. And so that's your Christian vision of marriage. This is where it's legally okay. This is where you could have children. Outside of that is unacceptable. So I'm not disagreeing with those boundaries, because that is the Christian ethic, that sex is for the context of marriage and not outside of it. And that one of the beauties of our sexuality within marriage is that it's life-giving and life-producing. And so those are valuable and important. But in the argument to preserve that, people who wanted to liberate sexuality to something that doesn't intend to be harmful, but tends to be more than that, winds up creating this cultural clash where you have to choose between, do you want sex where you produce children, or where actually pregnancy would be the worst possible outcome? Do you want sex where it's legally bound and so you're just managing your desires? Or do you want your desires to be something that's actually enjoyable? And you have these kind of two choices. I could do it sort of the religious way, which is not enjoyable and not satisfying, but permissible. Or I could do it in the way that feels satisfying, except every 5 to 10 years we're needing to re-update our habits because every theory that we have proves over time to be problematic and harmful. And so now we're going to have the next experiments in sexuality, and we're realizing this is damaging. So we're going to keep shifting the ball, and the church is like, well, we're not doing that damage, nor are we having vibrancy and enjoyment, and therefore there's a damage that's happening that's unrecognized, and this is exactly what Satan would do. Turn us against one another and take a good thing and make it something that's preposterous. And we're all stuck in a certain level of immaturity where this is a topic that we can't think of in a mature way. Sexuality has to be part of Christian discipleship because it's one function in a package that says you and your egotistical, selfish desires are not the only thing. And so what does it mean to be generous? What does it mean to be patient? What does it mean to be truthful? All of these things are building blocks of the ethic of a Christian person that then postures you for a healthier approach to sexuality. And so it would be impossible with a drive as important as the sex drive, a powerful drive, for Jesus as the one who's going to show us the way of life to not have something to say about it and something we find restrictive. And yet we think if I want liberation, then I need to do it my own way. We're trusting ourselves, not recognizing the forces of desire, rather than saying maybe Jesus has something good, meaningful, and substantial, and if I'm willing to place sexuality within the context of the full life of discipleship, I might grow into a deep, more meaningful understanding. So it doesn't simply become a problematic desire I need to manage, but it could become something that is appropriately manageable, but also potential for great connection and deepening in life and relationship. And so this is not a sermon on sexuality, so there's a lot that could be said about what's in and what's not in and the appropriate boundaries and all of those things. But just wanting to highlight an example where in Christian discipleship there's a positive vision of what we could have, and yet day by day you'll have to deal with the desire that you recognize this desire is not good. And so while I'm wanting to pursue life, however you see it, but for Christians, the fullness of life and godliness, I'm going to have to recognize, but I still have a desire that's corrupted. And part of it is resisting that and managing it and putting it in place. But we're going to get next into how to do that in a healthy way. But let me just talk about the last item here. Verses 8 to 9, I'll have to be a bit briefer on this just because I didn't mean to talk, some of you know that well, I could have gone on for 2 more hours in the sexuality thing. We'll be brief on 8 and 9. Anger, wrath, malice, slander, obscene talk from your mouth. Don't lie to one another. One theme that groups these together is our speech. And that's not the only way to see this, but the problem is with the unruly desires in our hearts, and it feels sometimes the best we can do is to try to restrain them, although I wonder how many of you are finding trouble restraining not saying all the problematic things that you're thinking. Occasionally it comes out. But it feels like the best we can do is simply not say it, even though there's a war inside of the various things that we hate. Our anger is there, and we don't know how to express it in a healthy way. And so the idea here is, to grow and to change, somehow you need to recognize these desires are in you. Your anger itself is not a problem. If somebody you love is being harmed and you're angry, that's exactly the response that you should have. But we get angry over petty things, or we get angry over something true, and then our anger blinds us, and our response to it is problematic and damaging. So we need to learn to figure out, how do we use our words to be truthful and to build up rather than to slander, rather than to lie? How much are we trying to control because inside we feel out of control? And if you feel like you're not the kind of person that needs forgiveness that's offered to you, pay attention to this week to your words. All of the things that you say, or all of the things you want to say that you're trying not to say. And you'll realize you need something to help you deal with what's going on that is more than just restraint, more than just morality or ethics. You need something transformative, and that's what Christianity promises. Verse 6 says, on account of these things, the wrath of God is coming. We think God is like us. God is just impatient. He can't take it anymore. He's going to be unhinged. But that's a misunderstanding. God is wise and just, and he's watching us take all of these good things and destroy ourselves and one another with it. And at some point, he's going to draw the line. You can't continue to do this. So I'm allowing time to warn you, to show you a better way, learn of a better way, but at some point, we need to end this so you're not continuing killing one another and abusing one another. So at some point, God will come and deal with things. And so we need to be aware not to take lightly these inclinations in us, but to figure out how is Jesus trying to free us, to deliver us, to bring us out of that. So what is the problem? There's an earthly problem. It's not that we live on the earth. It's not that the earth is a material place, but there's something corrupt in the nature of this world and how it's organized in our own hearts and in the forces around us that we need to figure out how to get out of so we could live differently in the world. So secondly, how do you deal with it? And that's where this passage is important in the context, because it's giving a theory of change that's more mature. And therefore, it's not as intuitive to us. But if you're willing to trust Christ and to live according to his ways, you'll find that you could progress beyond where you have been. And so there are three phrases in the translation we use where the word put is there. Put to death, put away, and put off. And each of these are saying the same thing, but it's saying it from a different angle, which is helpful. Because if you want to mature, you don't just need one strategy, but you have to understand in the complexity of the world, how am I experiencing this? How am I going to deal with it? So we'll look at each of those three. It's not that these are the only three, but I think they give a perspective on how to deal or how to understand these unruly desires and the unruly people with their desires around us and how we organize the world. So first, put to death. That's verse 5. So, this language is helpful because it's very clear. We don't want to allow problematic things to remain. So in the sexuality problem, it's great if you're not going out there, committing great crimes, but that pornography that you're trying to manage in your life, but you feel is not really as big a deal because that's just a private thing. This passage is saying it's feeding a harmful view. There's nothing about it that fits a proper ethical view of sexuality. And so you can't allow it to continue to remain, but somehow you just need to be clear, this doesn't belong. That doesn't mean that you won't be tempted or that it won't be there, but there needs to be that clarity that sometimes there are things that are problematic that you need to put to death. I can't allow this continue to be influencing my life. So the putting to death is valuable. But one thing to highlight about this is that's probably instinctive to most of us, or how we've learned to deal with problems. If there's a problem, you overpower it. And so you need to be a fighter. And so morally, if you have a desire you don't like, you need to defeat it. And our desires are too powerful and too rooted for us to simply win by fighting. And so like one of the strategies in a boxing match, boxing is typically a very long fight. So you need to have skill, you need to have strength. But at the end of the day, if you don't have stamina, you might lose. And so one strategy is just to stay in the match as long as the other person absorb as much as you can until they tire out. And once they're tired, you could win. One of the dangers of taking a moralistic approach to saying it's all in my strength to just kill all these things in me is if the root is still there, eventually you're going to tire out and your desire is going to win. And if the only paradigm you have is the fighting paradigm, then that spills outside of just how you're managing your own emotions, but it's how you manage everything that's not in control, which is why right now where the world is sort of getting more complicated, what is the nature of economics, of politics, of AI, we're losing a sense of control. So what are we doing? Let's take control by fighting. And that paradigm is not the fundamental paradigm of the Christian nature, though there's an aspect where occasionally you need to resist, you need to defend, you need to stand up. And so in our moral formation, there's times that you need to resist, you need to do battle with your desires. But you need more of a paradigm than that, because if the whole of your moral life is just fighting and conquering, that will become the whole of your life. The language of putting to death is actually, that phrase, put to death what's earthly in you, somewhat unique in the New Testament. And it's not presented here to say this is the way to deal with your problems. It's presented because the theology of Colossians says, remember, you joined your life with Christ. Christ came and he died and he was raised. Have you been baptized? If you've been baptized, you were baptized into his death. And so the question of chapter 2, if you died with Christ, why are you still living in the world as though you're under its powers? And the question of chapter 3 is, if you've been raised with Christ, why are you not seeking the things that are above? It's that old and new, the death and life, that when he says, put to death what's earthly in you, he's saying you've joined your life with Christ, and therefore there's been a change from the old into the new. So why are you still allowing the old remnants to have influence and sway over you? You died with Christ when you were baptized with him, and therefore put it to death. So this is not so much about a constant battle, but it's about considering those desires as no longer the desires that own you and rule over you. Consider them dead. In the daily practice, it's going to feel like a fight. You're going to feel at times like you need to resist it, you need to face it, and you need a certain kind of strength. But know that that on its own can't be the only take. So there's put them away. That's verse 8. Put all these things, the anger, the malice, the lust, the greed, the idolatry, the covetousness, put them away. This week, as I was thinking about it, I imagined a family on a Thursday night having dinner and saying, you know what, why don't we play a game as a family? And so rather than, our normal thing of clearing the table, let's put the dishes to the side, let's pull out the games, and then, you have some games, and oh boy, it's really late, it's a school night, the kids need to go to bed, we'll just go to bed, and we'll just leave it out. So there it is, the table has the dinner dishes, the games on it, that itself not a problem, but Friday night comes, and you have guests that you invited over. And so you can welcome the guests and say, oh, last night we had this wonderful family game night, tonight we're gonna sit on the floor with paper plates, and we're gonna talk, welcome to our home. No, if the guests are coming, it's time to put those things away. So whatever the case is, whether or not it was appropriate last night, tonight you need to do the dishes and you need to put the game away. And that's what it seems to be saying. Whatever people think is acceptable for human life, now if your life is in Christ, things are different. You want the fullness of Christ to come into your life and the fullness of what he offers. And so whatever was part of your life, your anger, your slander, your malice, it's not simply that you need to conquer it and defeat it. You just need to recognize it doesn't belong in this new life. Why are you spending your time speaking negatively about people when you could be using your words to give thanks to the good things that God has given you, where you could encourage somebody discouraged? So put these things away. Your sexual immorality, why are you going around trying to exploit people because you're attracted to them? That's not part of this life. Put that away. It doesn't belong in this new way of life. It's part of the old enslaved way of life that's unproductive and damaging. And so put that away. And then the final is to put off the old self, verses 9 and 10. And the imagery that we're going to go into next week, we're going to look at the next section over the course of a number of weeks. It's like you're getting dressed. What does it mean in the beginning of chapter 3 when he said, seek the things above where Christ is? And it's almost kind of like going clothing shopping, where you put your mind in the heavenly realms and you see God's wisdom and you want to put that on. And you see the beauty and you want more of that. You see the truth and you take that and you see generosity. And so you set your minds to where Christ is and you start to clothe yourselves with that. But what that means is you need to take off those garments that you have on. And so if you've been invited to some fancy fundraiser with people that you work with and they have this $25,000 table that they gave you a free ticket to, you know that it's going to cost you something by the end of the night. But in the meantime, it's a black tie affair. But you have your normal before dinner exercise routine. And when you're done with it, you're like, you know what? These clothes are so much more comfortable than these stifling, pretentious clothes I have to put on. I'm just going to show up, with my friend from Goldman Sachs who paid for the table in my spandex pants and my sweat. And if you're not wanting to be invited to fundraisers, do that once, and that'll be good to make sure that nobody invites you. But you may be comfortable, you may feel that it's okay, but you're showing up smelling like you just worked out is not appropriate to that kind of occasion. And there's a picture here to say, look, the way people live, however you want to categorize it, there's a new life that's glorious. And so why would you take the things of Christ and put them over your corrupted nature? Why don't you just take that off? Set it aside. Christ has died for that. And so don't continue to justify it or excuse it or to allow it to live, but do the maturing work of putting it off. Why? Because there are things to put on that are good. I'm going to move on. I had an example of that. Here's your homework. Gossip. What is it? There's something complicated about gossip. There's something in us where we don't feel good enough. We resent others. It's envy. It's insecurity. Why do we form the habits? I was going to try to think through a little bit with you. Think through it this week. Slander, malice, these things we're to put off. Why is that an example of a temptation that's there? And as an exercise, when I see the desire to grumble, to join with others, to feel like our bond is we are going to speak wrongly about the other person, to recognize this desire is inherently problematic in a way that's complicated. So let me first just recognize it so I don't do it, so I put it off, but let me be renewed in my mind so I understand what the better way to live is. That's part of Christian maturity. So maybe we'll have a class on it next month. That's not this month's class, but think about how to apply these things. But here's the last thing. The question, why is this important? So the problem is our earthly nature, and we have to deal with it. The primary thing is to take on the fullness of life, but part of the way we deal with it is by needing to be intentional about the old habits, the old ways, the old temptations that keep coming up. We need to be aware of them, we need to resist them, we need to put them aside, we need to put them to death. But why is this important? So it's important because God is holding out life, saying, I'm giving you something that only I can give you that is precious and valuable. And if your hands are filled with everything you're taking hold of, there's no room in your life for it. So if you're going to go by your own habits of what makes sense to you, if you're going to do what you always did, you're trusting in yourself and your own ways or the methods of the world that are insufficient. You need something much bigger than just restraint or discipline or morality or religion. You need the very work and the power of God. And so that's why the grounding in Colossians is not simply that you should be putting to death what's earthly, but you should be joining the life of Christ who died so that in him the old self could be, with its problems could be put aside and the new self could come and thrive. And so it's important that Colossians, if you go back to chapter 1, pauses to talk about the preeminence of Christ. Before we talk about how you're supposed to live, look at Christ, the image of the invisible God, the one who holds all things together, the one who is before all things. There's no one like him. If you set your minds there, if you have the eyes to see it, and so pray that the Spirit would open your eyes to take more of the fullness in. There's such beauty and goodness that once you realize there's something of that value, that power will start to free you from the enslavement to these lesser things that you're trying to fill the emptiness of your life with. And so verse 11 says, Christ is all and in all. So that's chapter 1. Christ is the one who holds all things together. If you want a maturing life that starts to cohere, let him be your teacher, your guide, your strength. Enter into life with him. And as you're being formed, you will find the power of corruption lessening, the habits changing, and goodness starting to become more evident. You need to be patient. It takes time. It's not instantaneous. None of us are who we one day will be, but we all have the opportunity to be in the path of progress where we're putting aside the old, we're taking on the new, and week by week, year by year, we're growing. And so part of what's here in this picture, verse 10, you have put on the new self, which is being renewed in knowledge after the image of the Creator. So now you have new understanding, new knowledge. Jesus, your guide, is showing you the true nature of what's of life, of value. And the renewal, that spiritual renewal, happens after the image of the Creator. This is important. Colossians 1, Jesus is the image of the invisible God. What is God like? God has not kept himself hidden, but he has sent Jesus so that we would know something of the reality of God's justice, his mercy, his compassion, his goodness, his truth, his courage. All of these things that are in Christ. He is the image of the invisible God. That's important in Colossians because there's Christ who is the image. If we look to him, we see God, and then there's idolatry. There's the images that we create as we imagine God or life to be. And so Colossians 3 is saying, put to death your idolatry. Stop creating things that you think are valuable so that you could be God of your own universe. And stop looking to created things as though they could give you life, and start looking to the Creator, because he's the only one who can give you life. You know, there's a very interesting interaction in Matthew 22 where one group of the religious leaders is trying to trap Jesus. So they say, hey, are we supposed to pay taxes? So this is under the Roman Empire. At least one way of understanding the framing of the possibility of where they're trying to trap Jesus is, he came and announced a kingdom. The kingdom of the scriptures. And so if he says to pay taxes, that looks like he's ultimately under the Roman Empire and not bringing this transformative kingdom that's there. So is Jesus going to tell us to pay taxes? Or is Jesus going to admit publicly that we should not be supporting the Roman Empire, in which case then we could hand him over to the Roman Empire as a subversive? And so it's framed almost to create a scenario where Jesus has to navigate. We're framing things, here's a divide, here are two choices. Isn't that what the world is doing today? Here are two choices, which are you going to pick? And we're framing it, and you have to choose one. And if you don't choose it, we're going to alienate you. We're going to isolate you. That's the way the world works. They tried it with Jesus. The narrator says they weren't trying to learn. You could come with your questions to Jesus. They were asking a question they thought he wouldn't be able to answer, and his answer was interesting. He doesn't answer in a yes or no way. He says, take out a coin. Now, whose image is on the coin? And they say, well, the likeness, the inscription on this coin is Caesar. And that's, of course, what powerful human beings do. That's what governments do. Governments create money, coins, currency. And a government typically will not, the government will not lay down its life for its citizens, but they will recruit the citizens to an army to lay down its life for the government. But they will reward you. Here's the most powerful person in the empire, Caesar. Caesar has put value on this piece of metal, and if you're willing to lay down your life for the empire, you will be rewarded by the most powerful man in the universe. Caesar's not going to lay down his life for you, but if you lay down your life for him, he will reward you with something that he puts his image and value in. And Jesus comes and says, the kingdom that I am leading is not of this world. And so I am a leader who will lay down my life for you, not because I will give you what's of value, but because you are what's of value. What is your value? Well, whose image is in you? The inscription, the likeness within a human being is the one who has made that person in the image. So God comes for his lost people because they have inherent value. And so Jesus says, give to Caesar's what's Caesar's. Caesar made the money. If he wants the money, give it to him. He's not offering a view of taxation and government. He's saying if Caesar wants it, he owns it, give it to him. Give to Caesar what is Caesar's, but give to God what is God's. Caesar wants your money, let him have it, but God wants you. So why are you giving yourself to your money? Why do you think that if you have enough possessions and enjoyment and achievements that you will find life as though life is out there to be discovered? Life is put in you as a gift by the Creator who alone can give life, and you're taking that life and you're setting it aside to run after what is corrupt. Don't fall for it. Don't look at the things that the world loves and values and make sacrifices for them. Set your minds to where Christ is, because he has valued you. He gave himself for you. He was the one who suffered unjustly in order that our sin could be dealt with. The wrath of God is coming for these things. It looks as though the wrath of God fell upon Jesus himself, where he cries out like he was forsaken, so that he could say, now forsake your lives and find them in me. And you don't need to fear the future appearing of God, because he's not coming to judge you. He's coming to bring the fullness of life. So trust Christ, prepare for that day, not in your own strength, not with your own morality. See, morality says, I need to put to death these things in me so that I could attain life. And the gospel says life is given to you. So put to death what's earthly in you. You don't need to conquer your sin to prove anything. You need to conquer your sin because it's killing you. You're given life, so live that life in its goodness and fullness, and put away the old habits, the old self, the old identity. Just because you once did it doesn't mean you have to do it. Just because that's who you thought you were doesn't mean that's who you are. You have an identity given to you. Christ, who has loved you and has made you, has renewed you by giving new life. If you receive that, that's what we're talking about all year long. If you have received Christ the Lord, so walk in him, abounding with thanksgiving. You don't achieve life, you don't earn it, you receive it. So stop trying to find life in the things that are made. Receive the life from the one who made you. And now handle the things that have been made in an appropriate manner. They're temporal, they're gifts. Use them if they're enjoyable, avoid them if they're harmful, but don't hope in them. Set your minds to where Christ is, hope in him. That's where you find life. And the emphasis here is not on trying to morally change, it's trying to take on the fullness of life. But to do that, you're going to need to deal with your habits, your desires, your corruption. You're going to need to put them to death. You're going to need to put them away. You're going to need to put them off. Why? Because there's so much better, and those things are keeping you from it. So devote yourself to the goodness of what God offers for you, and stop holding on to what's killing you and those around you. And that's the way of life. That's the way of growth. That's the way of maturity. So pray for God's help and power in it. Let me pray for us. Our Father, it perhaps seems so clear to some of us, Lord, for those who are still confused, trying to make sense of things, renew hearts and minds by the power of your Spirit. Free us so that we would really grasp this and understand it in a way that we know how to live. But Lord, even for those of us who think we get it, day by day, it's hard. We get it wrong. We continue to make the same stupid mistakes. Lord, thank you that you are merciful and patient, that you forgive us. But Lord, we want more of that fullness. We want to set our minds on what's really full of life and value. And so, Lord, this week, give us more of that satisfaction that produces thanksgiving, and give us more freedom from these things that lure us, that we hate and feel powerless against. Lord, may there be a new power in us, that power of your Spirit, so that we would take the goodness of the life that you offer to us and live it in fullness. Help us, we pray, to do this for your glory. In Jesus' name, amen.